Welcome, everyone, to another fine day here. The state of Greater Western New York is bright and sunny, at least when we're recording this. If you're watching it on a replay, who knows what it looks like? We'll tell you what, in a few days, we're going to be experiencing yet another election day. Voting's already started, and the rules keep changing. We're going to be talking about that on this week's episode. And as usual, it's brought to you by...
Each week, our community makes history. Each week, you make history. And each week, there's only one source to turn to for the first take on history. You know what that is? Subscribe to the Sentinel right now to discover the history being made in your own backyard. The Men in Nicolay Falls Lima Sentinel. More than just your news, it's your history. Welcome, everyone, to this edition of the State of Greater Western New York Report. Join us each episode as we discuss fantastic topics ranging from history to science to the strange and the wonderful, as well as the treasured spirit with which our region has infused America. We challenge you to consider all things Greater Western New York, from our region's very beginnings to how it inspires, how it empowers, and why it is so admired. Here's the host of the State of Greater Western New York Report, Chris Carosa.
Hi there and welcome, everyone. This is going to be a great show. We're going to be talking about something that is actually news, current news, and you may be watching this months from now, but it'll still be interesting. With us today are two commissioners from different counties' boards of elections. I think I said the plural right there. Ralph Mohr and Lisa Nicolay from Erie County and Monroe County. Let's get right into it, and we'll start with Ralph. Ralph, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you ended up on the Board of Elections? And maybe start with, what is the Board of Elections?
Well, the boards of elections in each of the counties of New York State are comprised of a Republican commissioner and a Democratic commissioner. They're recommended by the parties and appointed by the county legislature. They can serve for either 2 years or 4 years. In Erie County, we have a 4-year term following the appointment, and it's based upon the recommendation of the political parties that received the two highest votes for governor at the last gubernatorial election. I've been an election commissioner since 1993, so almost 30 years I've been in this job. And the purpose of the Board of Elections is to, on a bipartisan basis, qualify the candidates, set up the ballots, administer the elections, and certify the results of the elections that we conduct. It's not only the general election and the primary elections, which people are most familiar with, but the Erie County Board of Elections, as many of the county boards of elections across the state, participate and assist villages, school boards, fire districts, even unions in their elections as well.
Thanks, Ralph. Lisa, your background also, how did you get on your Board of Elections? And can you give us a little example of, say, the day in the life of a commissioner on the Board of Elections?
Sure. So apparently Ralph and I started in the municipalities around the same time. I've worked in Monroe County in various departments and having various responsibilities since 1993. I have been the Republican commissioner here since 2020. I started at the height of COVID when it first came out. And so I have a lot of experience in Monroe County government and politics, but I've only been the commissioner for 2.5 years. And it has been a fun ride. Day in the life of the commissioner is never the same day twice. It doesn't matter if it's 3 days before election day or if it's December and nothing really is happening. It's always a different day. We are constantly keeping up with New York State changes and rules. We are constantly updating our voter registrations. You know, people come on and off the polls all the time. So it is never the same day twice, and it's been a very challenging and fun place to work.
So there are boards of elections in each county. Are there, and we'll start with you, Lisa, on this question, and then Ralph, you could chime in if you want afterwards. But is there a manual? Does every county follow the same manual, or are the rules different in each county?
Yeah, so one of the nice things about being a commissioner is that if you have a good relationship with your counterpart, and I'm the Republican, so my counterpart is Jackie Ortiz. She's the Democrat commissioner. If you have a good relationship and you can work together, it's your responsibility. The two commissioners make up the board and vote on things and decide how things are run. So yes, there are a lot of rules, a lot of laws that affect elections, but the actual administration of them, we just have to agree bipartisanly to do it a certain way, and we have a lot of leeway in that respect.
Ralph. Oh, go ahead, Ralph. Yeah.
All the decisions of the Board of Elections by law have to be done by the concurrence of the commissioners. So you need two commissioners to agree to do anything. In Erie County, much like Monroe County, we have a great relationship between the Republican commissioner and Democratic commissioner. There are some boards that don't, and you'll see that across the state, there'll be some boards that are basically deadlocked and fighting all the time. That's something that we found to be very counterproductive to the administration, because we are a county department. We have to function. They don't postpone elections. You know exactly when the date is, and you have to go and have everything done by that time. So it does help a great deal when you get along with your fellow commissioner.
Ralph, what I was wondering is what's the interaction outside of the county with other counties? So do you have an annual meeting of all the county board of commissioners, or is it pretty much just insular? Everything stays within the county?
No, there's a great deal of information that we pass back and forth. There's a statewide registration database, and there's statewide registration. So if you are a registered voter in New York City and you moved up to Erie County, we have to transfer that registration and allow you to vote here in Erie County. We have generally 3 conferences a year where the commissioners get together. There are informational conferences, instructional conferences, and many of the commissioners are called upon to give presentations on things that they're particularly familiar with. And so there's a great deal of interaction that we have as well. I receive calls from other commissioners, because I'm an attorney as well, asking advice on certain things when they get into disputes.
Do you find the same thing, Lisa, when you talk to other people in other counties?
Yeah, it is helpful, but I would say that Monroe, Erie, and Onondaga have the same approximate sizes of voters in their counties. So reaching out to those two are often more helpful than a small county or New York City, because we don't have as much in common. But it is good to share ideas and suggestions with each other, because you always learn. And if there's something that happened here that I think is unusual, it's probably likely that it happened somewhere else at some point.
Let's talk about, but before I ask the next question, let me tell the audience, if you folks out there who are watching live, and only if you're watching live, if you have a question, put it in the chat, and I'll try to ask it. But Lisa, I was wondering, generally on election day, there's I don't remember exactly what they're called. I think they're called election inspectors. But do they go through your office? Do you hire those people? And how could people become election inspectors?
Sure. So in Monroe County, for a general election, we hire almost 3,000 folks to help us. Some people call them poll workers or election inspectors, but yes, they are hired bipartisanly. So about half of them are Republicans and half of them are Democrats. And they are trained. We have a training team of about 5 or 6 folks, both sides as well in training. And we're always looking for additional inspectors. We have a full staff this time, but you never know when the next one's going to come up, if not just the regular scheduled elections. So we encourage people who are interested to reach out. We have a lot of information on our website, monroecounty.gov/elections. We have online training and in-person training, and our recruiting and training team does a great job of getting additional people to help us when we need.
And Ralph, on your end, what happens if you don't have enough inspectors? Is that just something you have to deal with, or is that a showstopper in some way?
Now, that's something that we have to deal with, and at times we've been short inspectors, or inspectors have gotten sick in the morning, called in, said, I can't make it to the polls, and we've had to send out employees. I don't think there's a county in the state that doesn't have problems one time or another with election inspectors, and I got to commend Lisa for being able to have 100%. We're nowhere near that in Erie County, but we use the same resources. We have inspectors are required to go through an annual training, and we have information on our website as well, and how to become an election inspector. And people contact us through the website or through phone calls asking to become. We just recently raised the pay in Erie County for election inspectors. The legislatures in each of the counties set the pay, and that's one of the problems. So you're going to see a disparity. Up until now, when we're now paying $250 a day for an election inspector, but before that we were only paying $190, and people didn't want to work from 5:30 in the morning until 9:30 at night, basically with only 2 or 3 breaks, and say for that amount of money. So we've had to be very ingenious as to how do we go out and recruit election inspectors. But it's a bipartisan effort, and you do have, when you go to a polls, inspectors from both the Democratic Party and the Republican Party there, and you have to cover the lunch breaks, you have to cover the dinner breaks, and it's a big job. We have over 4,000 inspectors that we have to provide for.
You anticipated my question about whether you feed them. There's a question from the audience, and that is, do you have to be a Republican or a Democrat? What if you're registered as an independent or one of the other parties that you can register for?
Yeah, I don't know about Ralph, but we've started, if someone is a blank or a conservative or a libertarian, we have allowed them to help us, especially if we were in need. But they do have to sign a form that says they will work on behalf of one party or the other, because that is the law. So we don't require them to change their registration, but we do have them vow that they are going to work as a representative of a Republican or a Democratic Party.
And that's the same situation that we have here in Erie County as well. The history of it is that the parties used to recommend the election inspectors, and the law is still written that way, where in June they would send a list to the Board of Elections, and we would pick election inspectors off of that list. In many, many counties, that practice has gone away, and it's been up to the Board of Elections to go out and seek election inspectors. So that's how it was before, when you had just Democrats and Republicans making recommendations. Now we welcome people from other parties as well, in the same manner that Monroe County does.
Ralph, Lisa gave her URL for people who are interested in maybe joining. Do you have a same simple URL that you could just voice that people could go to?
Elections.erie.gov, and we have all the information there as well.
And anybody could go to either one of these sites, no matter what party you are, and just apply to earn $250 or whatever it is based on the county, just to sit there with the elections. I'll have to admit, I was an election inspector once in New Haven, Connecticut, and it was a long day. It was the 5:30 to 9:30. It was the 1980 presidential election that year. They were desperate for people to fill the polls, so I went in there, and I didn't know what was happening until I came out. I was just there. I mean, you don't know. You're kind of locked out of the news, but you make friends. That's one thing, is you make friends with everybody. It doesn't matter what party they are, because you're all in it together, and you're all learning it. Let's see, we have a couple minutes before the break. Is there anything about the election inspector job in general? We'll start with Ralph on this one, that surprised you before, when you went into it, when you first went into it? Was there something that surprised you? At least I'll ask you the same question after Ralph goes.
Well, it's an involved process. You're not just sitting there wasting the hours. You're doing a lot of work, and you're doing a very important amount of work, and you have to know the basics of elections. There is annual training, which is required of all election inspectors. Like Monroe County, we have training online as well. So, but you have to basically qualify for that training online as opposed to in-person training. When we have in-person training, it takes about 2 to 3 hours for that training to go about, and you come into the different scenarios. We have electronic poll books now in most of the portions of Erie County, so you have to have some familiarity with electronics and the ability to check people in. When you have election inspectors that are dedicated to the job, it makes it so much easier and so few problems on election day. It's very important. The job of the inspector is very important.
So, Lisa, you came in at kind of a weird time for everybody. So I'm sure probably nothing surprised you at that point. But if you could pick one thing that surprised you, what would it be?
Just the sheer number of people that we need to help make sure that the day goes smoothly. Everybody's kind of insulated when you go vote. Even if you're a seasoned voter, you go to your same location, you see the same 6 or 8 people, and you don't realize that there's 200 or 300 additional locations like that all around the county. With additional people and resources. And it is a long day. When you go vote, it usually takes a few minutes and you're in and out. But these folks, like we talked about, they're there at 5:30 in the morning. It's a long day. A lot of them are retired, or they're, people who can afford to take one day off of work or have the day off of work. But it is a very important job, and we appreciate every single one of the people that helps us with that. It would be great if we could pay them more, but I think the people who do it because it's part of they feel like it's part of their civic duty, and we really do appreciate that.
All right. Well, thanks. So we'll come back, and when we come back, we're going to be talking about what's happening right now with this year's election, with the court rulings that have opened up an old process, I guess you might call it, and the ramifications it may or may not have on this year's election. So stay tuned. We'll be right back after this message.
Through the mists of time, nature and man have both created and buried treasures beyond the imagination. With the ages, these riches slowly dissolve into mere myths until they are forever forgotten. But there are those brave souls who tirelessly cling to the truth, ever seeking to discover the undiscovered, to reveal what has always been there, to uncover the hidden gems of a land thought forsaken but loved by millions. 50 Hidden Gems of Greater Western New York. Discover the secrets in your own backyard. Buy your copy now at 50hiddengems.com.
And welcome back to the State of Greater Western New York report. Today we're talking with Ralph Mohr. He's the Commissioner of the Board of Elections of Erie County, and Lisa Nicolay, she is the Commissioner of the Board of Elections in Monroe County. There was a court ruling that came back on Tuesday. This would have been 2 days before this was broadcast. This show was originally broadcast. That reversed a ruling from a week or so ago regarding the use of absentee ballot procedures. They are returning now with this new ruling. They're returning to the COVID rules, I believe. So let's start with Ralph. Can you just bring us up to speed? What was this original court case about, the first one? Who brought it, and what did they decide?
Well, it's a complicated case, and there are many facets to it. I was one of the plaintiffs on that lawsuit, as was the Republican Party and the Conservative Party and some regular voters. It had several aspects to it. The first aspect, and the most important aspect of it, was with regard to the manner in which absentee ballots are canvassed at the Board of Elections and cast. For 100 years, you were able to go and request an absentee ballot for a reason of absence from the county or illness or some other type of disability. And you could go and cast that ballot and then show up at the polls on election day if your circumstances changed. In the event, say, your boss told you you had to be out of town on election day, you would apply for an absentee ballot. You could vote it, send it into the Board of Elections, and then if your plans change, you'd be able to go to the polls and cast your ballot on election day. The Board of Election would notice that you voted on election day, and we would pull your absentee ballot and not count it. The law changes here to require the boards of elections to open up ballots within 4 days of receipt, stack them up, and then count them before the start of early voting, after early voting, and before the start of election day, and then also after election day, any ballots that can come in. An absentee ballot is valid if it is postmarked the day of an election and received, if you're military or overseas personnel, 13-day, up either 7 days or 13 days, depending on your category, after the election. The Board of Elections in the different counties would handle absentees when they counted them after election day. Some would count them the night of the election day, some would count them a few days after, some would wait till the very end. In Erie County, we always used to wait till the very end because we have 827 election districts. You have to report it. And ballots that would, if we counted them on election day, any ballots that were received after election day would change the result of the elections that we initially reported. And if you spread it out over 827 districts, there'd be many districts where only 1 or 2 ballots came in, and you'd be able to tell how that person voted. So it would destroy the secrecy of the ballot. That procedure of requiring the counting before election day changed this year. And instead of counting everything after election day or on election day, it was counted before. So the challenge was brought basically on 2 grounds. One is that once you slit up the ballots and separate the ballot from the envelope, you no longer have accountability. So people can no longer go to the polls and change their minds, or if their circumstances change, go and vote on the polls. Once they cast their absentee ballot, that's their vote. That's it. We've had instances in Erie County where somebody cast their ballot 45 days before the election, well before early voting started, well before election day, died, and that dead person's vote counted in the election before you'd have to be alive on election day, or at least the start of early voting, to have your vote counted. The other thing that was claimed in the lawsuit was that the secrecy of the ballot, by counting them at this different time, you're diminishing the pool of votes that are coming in yet to be counted. So as you're reporting these results on election day, it leaves less and less ballots to come in, which makes it more likely that somebody will be able to figure out how someone else voted. That was the one aspect of the lawsuit. The second aspect of the lawsuit was the continuation of COVID as an excuse for balloting. And Erie County was the first county in the state in 2020 to allow for COVID as an excuse for voting. So that certainly wasn't the objection. But the objection is that, brought by some, was that the fear of illness was treated as an illness for the purposes of receiving election absentees. And when you had pre-filled applications coming in that checked the box for people without the people themselves checking the box, that was a problem. There was also another case that was heard prior to this time, which ruled specifically on that second issue of the continuation of the COVID restrictions now into 2022 and perhaps even beyond 2022. And those were the 2 cases that merged and came up. The lower court, the Supreme Court in Saratoga County, the judge ruled on the merits and said that when you had the opening of the ballots by any one commissioner and the counting of the ballot based on any one commissioner, it violated the state constitution. When we talked in the opening part of this discussion, we talked about the bipartisan nature of the board, the fact that everything is done with the concurrence of both commissioners. You had a Democrat and Republican, and that was your check and balance, and that's required by the Constitution. When you now have one commissioner overruling another commissioner, it takes away that check and balance. And the second aspect was the secrecy. The court didn't rule on, the lower court held the absentee ballot changes to be unconstitutional, and then went and decided that because of that other case, they weren't able to rule on the secrecy or the absentee continuation of the illness. And then it came up to the appellate division.
Mm-hmm. We have some questions coming in, but very quickly, Lisa, can you sort of give us what the picture looks like now with the ruling on Tuesday, and maybe what the commissioners or the plaintiffs will do going forward?
Well, from an administrative position of being in charge and making sure that all these votes get counted accordingly, I am happy that the decision was overturned in the appellate court, because we were already following the law of this year and had opened, I think, around 6,000 or 7,000 ballots, like Ralph said, and they're just, locked up, but they were open. So there's no way, if this was going to continue to disallow those people to vote absentee, there was no way to put those back in the envelopes. Like, the cat was out of the bag. So while I do in substance agree that we should not allow, for fear of COVID or contracting an illness, to allow someone to have an absentee ballot, I think it should be for real purposes, whether you're out of town or sick or away at college or things like that, not just because you're too lazy to go to the polls. I think that for our own purposes for this election, I'm glad that it worked out. So we're continuing to do it the way we have. And just one thing to add to Ralph, he did a great job explaining the whole thing. The only additional thing I would say is that we had a referendum last year that was on the ballot to allow for no excuse absentee voting, and the people of New York voted it down. So they don't think that there should be no excuse absentees. And I think that the COVID excuse, or the fear of getting COVID at this point, is essentially no excuse absentee, and the people have spoken. So I don't think we should go back on that.
So let me. Sorry, Ralph. Go ahead.
That's okay. The appellate division did not rule on the merits. What they basically said is exactly what Lisa did. We're well into the process, so we're not going to disrupt it for this year, and we're dismissing the lawsuit as a result. But they never reached a constitutionality. They never said that it was constitutional, and they never said that it overrode what the voters did last year. So that's still an open question.
So we have several questions coming. I'm not even going to ask my question. I'm going to try to go through these questions. I'm going to do my best to ask them. So one question said that absentee ballots are being challenged in Warren County. I don't know if they're referring to Warren County, Pennsylvania. Is there a Warren County in New York?
There's Warren County in New York, yes.
Oh, okay.
And that was where the Cavalier case came, which was a companion case that was started well before this, but was heard by the Third Department Appellate Division at the same time as this case. And again, in that case, the court didn't rule on the merits. What they said is, we're well into this election process. We're going to dismiss these lawsuits based on the fact that we're not changing the process for this year. But it's still an open question for next year.
So the Warren case, Warren County, New York case, has already been resolved, so to speak, at least for this year. And so it's irrelevant. So he wanted to know if it would apply to Erie and Monroe counties, and as a practical matter, it does. Then we have another question here that asks about something called ballot images. I tried to ask what those are. I don't know what those are. Maybe you do. Hopefully you do. But the question was, are they available now for the 2020 elections? Does that make sense to either one of you?
Yeah.
Okay. Can you explain what ballot images are?
Absolutely. So when you go to a polling place and you fill in your bubbles on your ballot and you feed it through, we have the paper copy that drops to the bottom of the ballot bag. It also captures an electronic image of your ballot. So that's what they're referring to, that those electronic images of the ballot. It's part of, the double check of if something happens to the electronic, we have the paper and vice versa. But that's what they're referring to. We have been advised by New York State that, well, first of all, they wouldn't be available until after the election, because right now they're still under some privacy ruling. So after this election, typically we destroy. We're required to keep things like ballots for 2 years, and then they get destroyed in whatever manner each board has. We typically shred. So we would be shredding those ballots and anything else from 2020, probably shortly after the 22 election. So there is a discrepancy whether we should be providing those electronic images or not. I think some people have foiled for them at different counties. And we're waiting for some guidance from New York State on whether that is public or private information.
So
we actually had a court case with regard to ballots in a race that was one vote apart. And the law stated that you cannot open up the ballot box and view the ballots without approval of the court order. So that's how we were handling it. And has been basically the law in the state.
So just so I understand, Lisa, were you referring just to Monroe County ballot images, or did this apply to the entire state?
I believe the other counties, most of them use similar machines and operations, so I believe they do have the same, but I wouldn't vouch for it. I can only vouch for Monroe County.
So at least in Monroe County, the ballot images for 2020, and you did ask the 2020 election. So the ballot images for 2020 aren't yet available to the public, but they may be available after the 2022 elections. But under normal procedures, they are destroyed after 2 years. So it sounds like, yeah, you're right. There's a discrepancy that you have to give the public some reasonable time to look at them for whatever reason. In my mind, just my opinion. I don't know if you share that. I don't know official, but it just seems to make sense to me. There's one more question here. We'll get to that. We're going to go a little bit over. I hope you guys don't mind. And this one, it has numbers involved. I'm going to try to shows. I'm assuming this is for the whole state, that there shows there were 8.7 million ballots cast, and that FOIL data for 2020 shows that there were 8.4 million unique IDs, implying that there were roughly 300,000 more ballots cast than voters. So I'm assuming this was a FOIL request, probably done by some reporting agency or media. They talk about this all the time when we go to publishers' conferences. So first of all, are you aware of this discrepancy or this apparent discrepancy? And is there a way to explain it that makes sense?
Well, first of all, you have to say that there's a discrepancy, but we have not been able to establish any discrepancy among the election officials. And it's important to note how results get reported. They're reported on a county level and then sent to the state of New York. What I know a little bit because we've received letters with regard to this, and everything we've checked into has not borne out the way that request has been made and show the same things. There doesn't seem to be any overvotes. There weren't situations where there's a discrepancy, and counties use county registration numbers to identify individuals. The state has a similar number that they assigned, but the counties don't utilize for people. And I think what's happening is that there's some kind of error that's going on by individuals are mixing up the state ID numbers with the county ID numbers and saying that there's duplicate voters, and that's just not the case. So I would dispute the premise of that entire question.
It sounds like rather than dispute it, it just means you should probably find whoever it is that's doing this and in a public and transparent way, go through the numbers with that organization or that group, whether it be a reporter or an independent group, and just show them what it is. Otherwise, it's going to look like, hey, something's being covered up. Because I know when you...
Our entire process is open, and we put on our website the dates that ballots are open, that the tallies are counted, that the canvasses are done. We have the canvas sheets from those elections, and the numbers that we reported to the state we're very confident on.
Right. Well, I know how reporters think. So it's almost like you're going to have to put their nose right in the numbers. And I was like, go ahead and do it. I mean, as a journalist, I'm inviting you to just go ahead and do it because it will just leave the questions out. I mean, it'll make it very clear that that either there was a mistake or there's no mistake or whatever. Who knows? That's just, again, my opinion. As a journalist, it just might make things easier so we can, I'll be talking about the same thing. Is there anything else from your perspective before we wrap it up? We're running a little bit over time. I apologize, but I did want to give you guys a chance to say as much as you wanted to say. So is there anything more that you want to add, either one of you?
No, just if anyone has any questions as regard to their eligibility to vote or where they go and vote, check out any one of the county's websites, give the county boards of elections a call. We're here to help you. We're here to assist you, and we're more than happy to do so.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Ralph, Lisa, for being on today's show. Thank you all out there for listening and giving your questions. It's always more interesting when the live audience gives questions. If you want to be a member of the live audience, surprise, you could. Just go to stateof.greaterwesternnewyork.com. There's a form there. Just sign up for the form. It's free. Every Thursday morning, you'll get the private invitation so that you could be a member of the live audience. And with that, we'll just remind you that if you miss the live audience, you can always see it on the archive on our site, or like our Facebook page at 1:30 on Sundays. It's rebroadcast at that time on Facebook or YouTube. So you can subscribe to our YouTube channel. Again, at 1:30, when it's rebroadcast, you will be notified by either Facebook or YouTube. So that's it for today. Thank you all for coming, and we'll see you all next week.